The light turned green again. This time, Margaret took one small step forward, then another. Her left leg felt wobbly, like it might give out any second. The white lines painted on the asphalt seemed to blur together. A taxi honked its horn right next to her, and she jumped back onto the sidewalk. Her walking stick clattered on the concrete as she stumbled. "Watch where you're going!" The taxi driver yelled out his window before speeding away. Margaret's hands were shaking worse now. She fumbled in her purse for her glasses, but putting them on didn't help much. Everything still looked fuzzy and far away. The cars seemed to be moving faster than they used to, or maybe she was just moving slower. She remembered when her son David was little, how he used to hold her hand when they crossed streets together. His tiny fingers wrapped around hers, trusting her completely to keep him safe. Now she was the one who needed someone to hold her hand. But David was busy these days. Too busy for his old mother. The light changed to red again. She had been standing here for 10 minutes now, maybe longer. People kept walking around her like she was a tree or a mailbox. Something that belonged on the sidewalk but didn't really matter. A businessman in an expensive suit checked his watch and rolled his eyes when he saw her blocking part of the crosswalk. "Seriously?" he muttered under his breath. Margaret wanted to tell him that she wasn't trying to be in anyone's way. She wanted to explain that she used to be quick and confident too, that she used to have places to go and people waiting for her. But the words stayed stuck in her throat. The afternoon sun beat down on her gray hair, making her feel dizzy. She should have stayed home today. Should have just ordered her groceries online like David kept telling her to do. But she hated feeling trapped in her small apartment all day. She needed to get out, to feel like she still belonged in the world, even if the world didn't seem to want her anymore. Margaret closed her eyes and tried to remember what her husband Robert used to tell her when she got scared. "One step at a time, Maggie," he would say in his calm, steady voice. "Just focus on the next step." But Robert wasn't here anymore. He had been gone for 3 years now, and Margaret still felt lost without him. He used to drive her everywhere. He used to be her eyes when hers got tired, her steady arm when her legs felt weak. Now she was on her own in a city that moved too fast for someone like her. The light turned green for the 3rd time. Margaret watched as a mother pushed a stroller across the street, chatting on her phone like crossing busy traffic was no big deal. A jogger ran past in the opposite direction, barely breathing hard. Even an old man with a cane made it across, though he moved slowly. Why couldn't she do what they did? Why had something so simple become so impossible? Margaret's breathing got faster and more shallow. Her chest felt tight like someone was squeezing her ribs. The sounds of the city, car engines, honking horns, people talking, construction work, in the distance, all mixed together into one big, overwhelming noise. She pressed her back against the traffic light pole and closed her eyes. Maybe if she just stood here long enough, the feeling would pass. Maybe someone would notice she needed help. But minutes went by, and nobody stopped. People had their own problems, their own places to be. Why would they worry about one confused, old woman? Margaret thought about her small apartment waiting for her on the other side of the street. She had walked to the grocery store this morning without any trouble, but now, loaded down with 2 heavy bags and feeling tired from the heat, the journey back seemed impossible. Her left arm ached from carrying the groceries. Her right hand cramped from gripping her walking stick so hard. Her feet hurt in the sensible shoes that used to be comfortable. When did everything about living become so hard? The light turned green again. Margaret forced herself to take one step off the curb, then another. She made it about 3 feet before a delivery truck rumbled past and she froze again. The truck wasn't even close to her, but the sound and vibration made her panic. She shuffled backward to safety, bumping into someone behind her. "Excuse me," she whispered. But the person was already gone. Margaret felt tears building up behind her glasses. She was stuck. Really, truly stuck. And for the first time in her 78 years, she had no idea what to do next. The busy intersection kept moving around her like a river flowing past a rock. Cars stopped and started with the rhythm of the traffic lights. People crossed back and forth like they were dancing to music she couldn't hear. But Margaret stayed frozen in place, holding her breath and hoping that somehow, some way, someone would notice that she needed help. She just didn't know that help was already on its way. 12-year-old Damon was thinking about his math homework when he first noticed the old lady by the traffic light. She had been standing there for a really long time, longer than anyone else. While other people crossed the street and went about their day, she just stayed in the same spot. At first, he didn't think much about it. Adults did weird things sometimes. Maybe she was waiting for someone or talking on the phone. But as he got closer, walking home from school with his backpack bouncing on his shoulders, he could see something was wrong. The lady looked scared. Really scared. Her hands were shaking as she held onto her walking stick. Her face was pale, and she kept taking deep breaths like she couldn't get enough air. Every time the light turned green, she would take a tiny step forward, then quickly step back onto the sidewalk. Damon stopped walking and watched her. His mom had always told him not to talk to strangers, especially not alone. "Mind your own business and get home safe," she would say. The neighborhood could be tough sometimes and 12-year-old kids needed to be careful. But this felt different. This lady wasn't dangerous. She was just stuck. Damon remembered being stuck once, too. Last year, when he was walking home from the library, a group of older kids had cornered him near the basketball courts. They wanted his new sneakers, the ones his mom had saved up for months to buy him. He had stood there frozen, just like this old lady, not knowing what to do. A man named Mr. Johnson from the corner store had seen what was happening. He came over and told those kids to leave Damon alone. Then he walked Damon all the way home even though it was out of his way. "Sometimes we all need a little help," Mr. Johnson had said. "That's what neighbors do for each other." Damon looked around the busy street. Everyone else was walking fast, staring at their phones or talking to someone. Nobody seemed to notice that the old lady needed help. They were all too busy with their own lives. But Damon noticed. He took a deep breath and walked over to her. Up close, he could see that her eyes were watery behind her thick glasses. Her grocery bags looked heavy, and her knuckles were white from gripping her walking stick so hard. "Excuse me, ma'am," Damon said in his politest voice, the one his grandmother had taught him to use with adults. "Are you okay?" The old lady looked startled, like she hadn't expected anyone to talk to her. She blinked a few times and looked down at him. "Oh," she said in a shaky voice. I'm just trying to cross the street." Damon looked at the crosswalk, then back at her. "It's pretty busy today," he said. "The cars go really fast on this street." She nodded quickly. "Too fast. Much too fast. And I can't. My eyes aren't what they used to be. Everything looks blurry and I get confused about which way the cars are coming from." Damon understood. His grandfather had trouble seeing too, especially at night. Sometimes when they went to the store together, Damon would describe things for him, like which aisle they were in or what color shirt someone was wearing. "Would you like me to help you cross?" Damon asked. "I cross this street every day going to and from school. I know exactly when it's safe." The old lady hesitated. Damon could see her thinking it over, probably wondering if she should trust a kid she didn't know. He didn't blame her for being careful. His mom had taught him that too. "My name is Damon," he said, hoping that would help. "I live just a few blocks from here with my mom. She works at the hospital downtown." Something about mentioning his mom seemed to relax the lady a little. Maybe because it showed he had a family, people who cared about him and taught him right from wrong. "I'm Margaret," she said quietly. "I live in the apartment building across the street. The blue one with the flower boxes." Damon looked where she was pointing and saw the building. It was nice, with colorful flowers in the windows and a clean front entrance. He had walked past it many times but never paid much attention. "That's not far at all," he said encouragingly. "We'll have you home in no time." Margaret looked at his outstretched hand, then back at his face. Damon tried to look as trustworthy as possible. He thought about how Mr. Johnson had looked when he helped him. Calm and confident, like everything was going to be okay. "You don't have to if you don't want to," Damon added. "But I promise I'll be really careful. My mom always says I'm good at watching out for cars. Finally, Margaret reached out and took his hand. Her fingers felt thin and cold, but her grip was stronger than he expected. "Thank you," she whispered. "It's been so long since someone—" She didn't finish the sentence, but Damon thought he understood. It had been a long time since someone had offered to help her. That made him feel sad and angry at the same time. How could all these adults just walk past someone who clearly needed help? "Don't worry," Damon said. "We'll go nice and slow." When the light turned green, Damon looked both ways carefully, even though they had the signal. He had learned in school that you should always double-check, because sometimes drivers didn't pay attention or were in too much of a hurry. "Okay," he said. "The coast is clear. Just hold on to my hand and follow my lead." They started walking together across the crosswalk. Damon kept his pace slow and steady, matching Margaret's shuffling steps. He could feel how nervous she was, the way her hand trembled in his. "You're doing great," he said, the same way his mom encouraged him when he was learning to ride a bike. "We're almost halfway there." A car honked somewhere behind them, but Damon didn't let it rush him. They had plenty of time to cross safely. Some drivers were just impatient. "Don't mind that guy," Damon said. "We have the right of way." Margaret squeezed his hand a little tighter. "You're very brave," she said. "When I was your age, I wouldn't have talked to strangers either." Damon thought about that. Maybe he was being brave, or maybe he was just doing what felt right. His mom always said that helping people wasn't about being brave or scared. It was about seeing someone who needed help and deciding to care. They reached the other side of the street, and Margaret let out a long breath she seemed to have been holding the whole time. "We made it," Damon said with a big smile. "We did," Margaret said, and for the first time since he had seen her, she smiled too. It was a nice smile, the kind that made her whole face look different. Younger somehow. "Thank you so much," she said. "I don't know what I would have done without you." Damon shrugged, feeling a little embarrassed by her gratitude. It wasn't a big deal, just crossing the street. But even as he said it, he knew it had been a big deal. At least to her, and maybe that was what mattered. Margaret looked down at her heavy grocery bags, then back at Damon. "I don't suppose you have time for a small thank you. There's a pretzel cart right over there, and I think someone who helps old ladies deserves a treat." Damon's stomach rumbled. He had been so focused on helping Margaret that he had forgotten how hungry he was. A pretzel sounded perfect. "Sure," he said. "That sounds really nice." The pretzel cart sat on the corner like a little island of good smells in the middle of the busy city. Steam rose from the warm pretzels inside the glass case, and the vendor smiled when he saw Margaret and Damon walking over together. "2 pretzels, please," Margaret said, reaching for her purse. "With extra salt on both." Damon started to protest. "You don't have to buy me anything, really." But Margaret waved her hand dismissively. "Nonsense. You helped me when nobody else would. The least I can do is buy you a snack." The vendor handed them their pretzels wrapped in thin paper napkins. They were still warm and smelled like butter and salt. Damon's mouth watered as he took his first bite. "There's a bench right over there," Margaret said, pointing to a small park area between 2 buildings. "Would you like to sit for a minute? These old legs need a rest." They settled onto the wooden bench together. Around them, the city kept moving at its usual frantic pace, but here in this little pocket of quiet, everything felt slower and more peaceful. "So, Damon," Margaret said, carefully breaking off a piece of her pretzel, "tell me about yourself. What grade are you in?" "7th, Damon said between bites. "At Jefferson Middle School. It's okay, I guess. Some of the teachers are pretty cool." "And what's your favorite subject?" Damon's face lit up. "Math, definitely. I know that sounds weird to most kids, but I really like solving problems. Like when you have all these numbers and equations that seem impossible at first, but then you figure out the pattern and everything just clicks." Margaret's eyebrows rose with interest. "That doesn't sound weird at all. Math is beautiful when you understand it. My late husband Robert used to say that math was like music, all patterns and rhythms that make sense once you learn to hear them." "Exactly," Damon said, excited to find someone who understood. My teacher, Mr. Rodriguez, says I'm really good at it. He thinks I should try to get into the advanced program at the high school next year. That sounds wonderful. You must study. Very hard, Damon shrugged. I like it so it doesn't feel like work, but… He paused, not sure if he should mention the other stuff. But what? Margaret asked gently. Well, our school doesn't have a lot of the fancy equipment like the schools in the richer neighborhoods. We don't have computer labs or science equipment, or anything like that. Mr. Rodriguez tries his best, but he has to buy a lot of supplies with his own money. Margaret nodded sadly. She had read about problems like this in the newspaper, but hearing it from Damon made it feel more real and more unfair. And what do you want to do when you grow up? She asked. I want to be an engineer, Damon said without hesitation. The kind that builds bridges and skyscrapers. I want to design things that help people, you know? Like better buildings that don't fall down in earthquakes or bridges that can handle more traffic. His eyes got that dreamy look that kids get when they talk about their big plans for the future. Margaret remembered that look. Her son David used to have the same expression when he talked about computers and technology. That's a wonderful dream, she said. The world needs more people who want to build things that help others. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching people walk by. A businessman hurried past, talking loudly on his phone about some important meeting. A young mother pushed a stroller while juggling a coffee cup and a diaper bag. Two elderly men played chess at a table nearby, completely absorbed in their game. What about you? Damon asked. Do you have any family around here? Margaret's smile faded a little. I have a son, David. He's very successful, very busy. He runs a big company downtown. That's cool, Damon said. Do you see him a lot? Not really, Margaret admitted. He comes by once a month or so, usually on a Sunday. But he's always checking his phone or taking calls. I don't think he really wants to be there. Damon frowned. He couldn't imagine not wanting to spend time with his mom. Sure, she could be annoying sometimes, especially when she made him clean his room or do his homework. But she was his mom. She worked 2 jobs to take care of him, and she always made time to ask about his day and help him with things. Maybe he's just stressed about work stuff, Damon offered, trying to be fair to someone he'd never met. Maybe, Margaret said, but she didn't sound convinced. He wasn't always like this. When he was young like you, we used to spend hours together. I would help him with his homework, and we'd talk about everything. He was curious about the world, full of questions and ideas. What changed? Damon asked. Margaret thought about that for a long time. I think success changed him. The more money he made, the busier he got. The busier he got, the less time he had for things that didn't make him more money, including me. That made Damon sad. He couldn't understand how someone could get so busy that they forgot about their mom. His own mom worked really hard. Sometimes she had to work double shifts at the hospital and came home exhausted. But she still always asked about his day and made sure he was okay. My mom works a lot too, Damon said. But she always says that work is just what you do to pay for the things that really matter, like family and having a safe place to live, and being able to help other people. Margaret looked at him with surprise. That's very wise. Your mother sounds like a smart woman. She is, Damon said proudly. She's a nurse, so she helps people get better when they're sick. She says it's not the highest paying job in the world, but it's the most important one she could think of. She's right about that, Margaret said. Your mother is doing something that truly matters. They finished their pretzels as the afternoon sun started to get lower in the sky. Damon knew he should probably head home soon. His mom would be getting off work in a few hours, and she liked to call him when she got home to make sure he was safe. I should probably go, he said reluctantly. My mom will worry if I'm not home when she calls. Of course, Margaret said, starting to gather her grocery bags. You've already been far too kind to a strange old lady. You're not strange, Damon said firmly. You're nice, and you're not that old either. Margaret laughed, a real laugh that seemed to surprise both of them. You're very sweet, Damon. It's been a long time since someone my age called me nice. They stood up from the bench together. Margaret seemed steadier now, more confident. The panic from earlier had faded, replaced by something that looked almost like happiness. "Thank you," she said again. "Not just for helping me cross the street, but for talking with me, for listening. You have no idea how much that means to someone like me." Damon felt a warm feeling in his chest. He had always been taught that helping people was the right thing to do, but he had never really understood how much a simple conversation could matter to someone. "Maybe I'll see you around the neighborhood," he said hopefully. "I'd like that very much," Margaret replied. "And Damon, don't ever stop dreaming about building things that help people. The world needs more engineers like you." As they parted ways, neither of them knew that this simple afternoon conversation would change both of their lives in ways they never could have imagined. David Henderson loosened his tie as he walked up the stairs to his mother's apartment building. It had been another exhausting day of board meetings, conference calls, and putting out fires at his tech company. His phone had buzzed with emails and messages all day, each one demanding his immediate attention. The monthly visit to his mother felt like just another item on his endless to-do list. 30 minutes, maybe 45 if she really needed something fixed around the apartment. Then he could get back to his penthouse and prepare for tomorrow's presentation to potential investors. He knocked on her door with the same rhythm he always used, 3 quick taps. Usually it took her a while to answer, shuffling slowly to the door with her walking stick. But today the door swung open almost immediately. "David," Margaret said, her face brighter than he had seen it in months. "Perfect timing. Come in. Come in, I have so much to tell you." David blinked in surprise. His mother looked different, more energetic. She was moving around the small apartment with more spring in her step than he remembered seeing in years. "Hi, Mom," he said, checking his watch out of habit. "How are you feeling? Any problems with the apartment? Need me to call the super about anything?" "Oh, forget about all that," Margaret said, waving her hand dismissively. "Sit down. Do you want some tea? I made fresh cookies this morning." David sat down on the familiar old couch, the same one from his childhood. Everything in this apartment reminded him of being young, when life was simpler and success was measured by good grades instead of quarterly earnings. "Cookies? Mom, you haven't baked in 2 years, Margaret finished for him. "I know, but today felt like a special day for some reason." She bustled around the small kitchen, humming to herself. David couldn't remember the last time he had heard his mother hum. Maybe not since before his father died. "Mom, are you feeling okay? You seem different." Margaret returned with a plate of chocolate chip cookies and 2 cups of tea. "I'm feeling wonderful, actually. Better than I have in a very long time. And it's all because of the most remarkable young man I met today." David felt his stomach tighten. "What young man?" "Mom, you know you have to be careful about strangers. There are a lot of scammers out there who target elderly people." "Oh, David," Margaret said with a laugh. "Not everything is a scam. Sometimes, people are just genuinely kind." She settled into her favorite armchair and began telling him about her morning. How she had gone to the grocery store but gotten overwhelmed trying to cross the busy street. How she had stood there panicking while everyone ignored her. And then how Damon had appeared like an angel and helped her across. David listened with growing concern. His mother was describing what sounded like a panic attack in the middle of traffic. What if this kid hadn't shown up? What if she had tried to cross anyway and gotten hurt? "Mom, this is exactly why I keep telling you to use the grocery delivery service. Or call me, and I'll have my assistant arrange for someone to shop for you." Margaret's face fell a little. "I don't want to be a burden, David. And I need to get out of this apartment sometimes. I can't just sit here waiting to die." "You're not waiting to die," David said automatically, though he realized he hadn't really been paying attention to how isolated his mother had become. "But you need to be practical about your limitations." Damon didn't see limitations, Margaret said firmly. He saw someone who needed help, and he helped. Then we sat and talked for the longest time. "Do you know he wants to be an engineer? Just like you wanted to work with computers when you were his age." Despite his concerns, David found himself curious about this kid. What kind of engineering? Civil engineering. He wants to build bridges and buildings that help people. He's brilliant at math, apparently. His teacher thinks he should apply for advanced programs. Margaret's eyes lit up as she continued talking about her conversation with Damon. She told David about the boy's dreams, his challenges at an underfunded school, his mother who worked as a nurse. "He reminds me so much of you when you were young," she said. "So curious about everything, so eager to learn and build things. Remember when you used to take apart every electronic device in the house just to see how it worked?" David did remember. He remembered staying up late with his father, trying to put those devices back together. He remembered the excitement of understanding how things worked, the thrill of solving complex problems. When was the last time he had felt that way about his work? These days, everything was about market share and profit margins and staying ahead of the competition. The joy of creating something new had gotten lost somewhere along the way. "The thing is," Margaret continued, "I keep thinking about what you said last month, about how hard it is to find good engineers for your company, about how the education system isn't preparing kids for the jobs of the future." David had said that. He complained about it regularly, actually. His company was growing fast, but finding qualified candidates was becoming increasingly difficult. "This boy has exactly the kind of mind you're always saying you need," Margaret said. "But he's stuck in a school that can't give him the resources to reach his potential. It seems like such a waste. Mom, there are thousands of kids in similar situations. I can't help all of them." "I'm not asking you to help all of them," Margaret said quietly. "I'm asking you to help one of them. One remarkable young man who took time out of his day to help a scared old lady when everyone else just walked past." David shifted uncomfortably on the couch. He could hear the urgency in his mother's voice, the passion that had been missing for so long. When was the last time she had asked him for anything? Really asked, not just mentioned small problems around the apartment. "What exactly are you suggesting?" he asked. "Meet him," Margaret said simply. "Just meet him. Talk to him for 5 minutes. See what I saw today?" "Mom, David, listen to me, really listen." Margaret leaned forward in her chair. "I haven't felt this hopeful about anything in years. This boy reminded me that there are still good people in the world, people who care about each other, who help without expecting anything in return." She paused, looking directly into his eyes. "When was the last time you felt hopeful about something? Not excited about a business deal or proud of a profit report, but truly hopeful about the future, about people, about what's possible?" David opened his mouth to answer, then closed it again. He couldn't remember. "I know you're busy," Margaret continued. "I know you have important meetings and decisions to make. But this matters too. This boy matters. And maybe helping him would matter to you in a way that nothing has mattered for a long time." David looked at his mother, really looked at her. She seemed more alive than she had since his father's funeral. More like the woman who had raised him, who had encouraged his dreams and celebrated his successes. "You really think this kid is that special?" he asked. "I know he is," Margaret said without hesitation. "And I think you'll see it too, if you give him a chance." David pulled out his phone to check his schedule, then stop. 3 days later, Damon stood outside Margaret's apartment building, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. His mom had helped him pick out his best shirt, and his hair was still damp from the shower. He clutched a small notebook in his hands, the one where he drew his engineering ideas and worked out math problems. Margaret had called his mom at the hospital yesterday, asking if Damon could come by for lunch. She mentioned that her son wanted to meet him, which made Damon both excited and nervous. He had never met a real businessman before, especially not one who owned a whole company. The apartment buzzed him up, and he climbed the familiar stairs to Margaret's door. When she opened it, her smile was warm and welcoming, just like before. "Damon, right on time. Come in, sweetheart." But as soon as he stepped inside, Damon felt the atmosphere change. A tall man in an expensive suit stood by the window looking at his phone. This had to be David, Margaret's son. He looked nothing like what Damon had imagined. The man was younger than Damon expected, maybe in his early 40s, with sharp features and tired eyes. His clothes probably cost more than Damon's family spent on groceries in a month. Everything about him screamed important and busy. "David, this is Damon," Margaret said, her voice bright but with a hint of nervousness. "Damon, this is my son." David looked up from his phone and extended a hand. His handshake was firm, the kind adults used in business meetings. "Nice to meet you, Damon. My mother has told me a lot about you." "Nice to meet you too, sir," Damon replied, using his best manners. An awkward silence filled the room. David seemed to be studying Damon like he was trying to figure out what made him so special. Damon felt like he was being interviewed for a job he didn't understand. Margaret bustled around, setting sandwiches and drinks on the small dining table. "Come on, you two. Sit down and get to know each other. I made those sandwiches you like, Damon, turkey and cheese with extra pickles." They sat around the table, David checking his watch discreetly. Damon could tell this man had somewhere else he'd rather be. "So," David said, taking a small bite of his sandwich, "my mother tells me you're interested in engineering." "Yes, sir. Civil engineering specifically. I want to design buildings and bridges." "That's nice," David said, though he didn't sound particularly impressed. "What got you interested in that?" Damon thought about how to explain it. Most adults didn't really understand when he tried to talk about the things that excited him. "Well, I was reading about this bridge that collapsed a few years ago. Pia. Opel got hurt because the design wasn't strong enough for the weight it had to carry. And I started thinking about how math could prevent things like that from happening." David's eyebrows rose slightly. "You read about structural engineering, failures on your own?" "I read about a lot of things," Damon said, gaining confidence. "The library has really good books about how things are built. Did you know that some of the oldest buildings in the world are still standing because the engineers who designed them understood how to distribute weight properly?" "I did know that, actually." David set down his sandwich and looked at Damon, with more interest. "What else do you know about engineering?" For the next few minutes, Damon found himself talking about load-bearing walls, suspension bridge cables, and earthquake-resistant foundations. David asked questions that showed he was actually listening, not just being polite. "Can I show you something?" Damon asked, pulling out his notebook. "I've been working on this design for a pedestrian bridge." He opened the notebook to a page covered with careful drawings and calculations. The bridge design wasn't fancy, but it was detailed and thoughtful. David studied it quietly. "This is interesting," David said. "You've accounted for wind load here. Where did you learn about that?" "Online videos mostly, and I asked Mr. Rodriguez, my math teacher, to help me understand some of the calculations." David flipped through more pages of the notebook. Each page showed a different project: a earthquake-safe school building, a water tower design, even plans for a community center. The drawings were rough, done in pencil, but the thinking behind them was sophisticated. "These are all your own ideas?" David asked. "Yes, sir. I like to think about problems and try to solve them. Like, our neighborhood doesn't have a good place for kids to go after school. So I designed this community center that could have tutoring rooms and a computer lab and a basketball court." "And you did all the structural calculations yourself?" "As best I could with what I know. I'm sure there are mistakes. I don't have access to the software that real engineers use." David looked at Margaret, who was watching the conversation with obvious pride. Something was shifting in his expression, like he was seeing something he hadn't expected to find. "Damon," David said slowly, "what's the biggest challenge you face in pursuing your education?" Damon hesitated. He didn't want to complain or make excuses, but David seemed genuinely interested in hearing his answer. "Honestly, my school tries really hard, but we don't have the resources. No computer lab, no engineering programs, limited math courses. Mr. Rodriguez does what he can, but he's teaching 5 different grade levels and has to buy supplies with his own money." "What about after graduation? Have you thought about college?" "All the time." "But," Damon looked down at his hands, "college is expensive. My mom is saving what she can, but we're not exactly rich. And even if I could afford it, I'd need better preparation than what my school can give me." David was quiet for a long moment. Margaret watched her son's face, hoping to see some sign of the caring boy she had raised. Finally, David spoke. Damon, what would you do if money wasn't an issue? If you could have any kind of education you wanted? Damon's eyes lit up. I'd want to go to a school with real engineering programs, with computers and labs where I could test my designs. I'd want to learn from teachers who are actual engineers, not just reading about it in books. And after that, I'd want to come back here, Damon said without hesitation. To my neighborhood. I'd want to design better schools and community centers, and affordable housing, places that would make life better for families like mine. David stared at him. You'd come back here? With an engineering degree, you could work anywhere, make a lot of money. Money's nice, Damon said, but it's not the point. The point is helping people, making things better. Margaret watched her son's face change as he listened to Damon talk. She could see the exact moment when David remembered what it felt like to care about something bigger than profit margins. You know what? David said, closing the notebook and handing it back to Damon. I think I might be able to help with some of those challenges. Over the next hour, David found himself making promises he had never planned to make. A full scholarship to the best prep school in the city. Summer internships at his company. Access to mentors and resources that would prepare Damon for any college he wanted to attend. But as they talked, something unexpected happened. David realized he wasn't just helping Damon. Damon was helping him remember who he used to be. When it was time to leave, David walked Damon downstairs. At the building entrance, Damon turned to him. Mr. Henderson, thank you for everything, but can I ask you something? Of course. Your mom is really lonely. She lit up when she talked about you, but I could tell she misses spending time with you. Maybe you could visit more often? Not because she needs anything fixed, but just because she's your mom. David felt something tighten in his chest. This 12-year-old kid had just given him advice about his own mother. And he was absolutely right. You're pretty smart, aren't you? David said with a real smile. Smart enough to know that helping each other is what makes everything else worth it, Damon replied. As David watched Damon walk away, he realized that the kid had already started engineering something important. He was building bridges between people who had forgotten how to connect. And for the first time in years, David felt genuinely hopeful about what tomorrow might bring. Ed himself. For once, maybe the schedule could wait. Okay, he said. I'll meet him, but just for a few minutes. Margaret's smile was brighter than any profit report he had ever seen.